Get her out, now. The manager's voice thundered across the pristine showroom as security closed in on a black woman in sneakers and worn jeans, completely unaware she owned the entire dealership. What happened next would leave the staff stunned and their careers in ashes. Hi, everyone. Today we're starting with a moment so humiliating, so charged with quiet injustice, that it left the room frozen in stunned silence. A woman stood in a luxury showroom surrounded by cars that gleamed like precious gems, yet every eye refused to meet hers. Every voice grew sharper, colder. She had done nothing wrong, said nothing inappropriate, yet she was treated like a threat, like a trespasser. But here's the twist they never saw coming: this woman owned the place. And what happened next was a masterclass in karma leadership, and power returned to its rightful hands. This could happen to anyone, even you. So, before we dive into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here, and drop a comment below with where you're listening from and the current time. I want to know where you are in the world as you hear this. It was 9:42 a.m. when Danielle Morgan pulled into the side lot of Crown Elite Motors in Beverly Hills. The morning sun hadn't yet burned through the ocean mist, but the dealership's marble white facade already gleamed with million-dollar polish. Danielle sat for a moment in her weathered 2014 Toyota Corolla hands, resting lightly on the steering wheel. Her breathing was steady, but her pulse betrayed the storm she was about to walk into. To anyone passing by, she looked like a woman just scraping by faded jeans, no-name sneakers, and a long-sleeved tee with a tiny hole near the cuff. Her natural curls were tucked into a plain baseball cap, her jewelry non-existent except for a simple wedding band. No designer labels. No heels, no chauffeur, but appearances lie. Danielle was 45, a self-made mogul who'd built the Morgan Lux Auto Group from a single used car lot in Compton to a $300 million empire with 14 dealerships across California. Crown Elite Motors was her latest acquisition, the crown jewel, and she'd spent more on that showroom than she had on her first 4 stores combined. But for all the glass chrome and champagne celebrations that came with the grand opening, something had begun to eat at her. It started with a voicemail from a loyal client who mentioned that her cousin had been turned away at the door. Then an email from an old friend who said the staff acted differently once they noticed his zip code. There were no smoking guns, no lawsuits, just subtle stories from people who didn't look the part. Customers who walked in with money and dreams, but walked out with shame and silence. Danielle needed to see for herself, and that meant stripping away her identity, her status, her armor. She stepped out of the Corolla and walked toward the gleaming glass doors of Crown Elite. No one noticed. There was no greeting, no smile, no offer of coffee, or even a glance. The dealership was nearly empty, just 3 customers inside, each being doted on by salespeople in slim-fit suits and toothy grins. Danielle stood for a full minute near the reception desk before clearing her throat. The woman behind the desk, tall, blonde, maybe late 20s, glanced up slowly, like she'd been interrupted from something far more important. Her name tag read Lindsay. Her eyes scanned Danielle from head to toe in half a second. Then came the voice, high, tight, and dipped in condescension. "If you're here to apply, our careers page is online," Lindsay said flatly, already turning back to her monitor. Danielle blinked once. "Actually, I'm here to look at sedans." The silence that followed was heavy. Lindsay didn't hide her skepticism. "Our sedans start at $45,000, not including tax or packages," she said, the tone sharper now. "You might want to try Crown Budget Auto on Melrose." It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Like Danielle's presence alone was offensive. Like the idea of her being able to afford a vehicle in this showroom was absurd. Danielle nodded once, her jaw tight but controlled. She turned to the floor, her eyes scanning the lineup. Sleek Lexuses, custom-built BMWs, a deep crimson Aston Martin. She stepped forward toward a polished black sedan, its interior glowing under the ceiling's recessed lighting. She hadn't taken 3 steps before a man intercepted her. He was tall, sharp-suited, with dark, slick-back hair, and the swagger of someone who thought the ground owed him stability. Chad Reynolds, sales manager. He didn't smile. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone already impatient. Danielle responded calmly. "I'd like to take a closer look at this model." Chad's smirk was almost practiced. "Ma'am, we require verified credit or proof of income before opening these vehicles. These are Specialty models. Danielle looked around. One customer was already sitting in another model, coffee in hand, chatting with a sales associate who had provided the keys without hesitation. She turned back. "I'm not asking to drive it, just to look." Chad raised his hand like he was stopping traffic. "These are very high-end vehicles. We can't just let anyone browse. It creates liability issues. I hope you understand." Danielle's mouth curved into something between disbelief and bitter amusement. "Is that your policy for all customers?" she asked. Chad stepped closer. "Let me be clear. We prioritize serious buyers, not browsers." The emphasis was deliberate, and so was the message. Danielle exhaled slowly. "And how exactly do you determine who's serious?" Chad's expression didn't change, but his eyes flicked to her shoes, her car keys, her shirt. Experience. Danielle stared at him for a long, loaded second. He didn't flinch. His arms were crossed. His voice was final. Behind them, Lindsay had stepped out from behind her desk and was now whispering something to a man in a navy blazer security. Chad's voice rose slightly for effect. "If you don't have business here, I'm going to ask you to leave." Danielle's hand stayed at her sides. "And if I don't, that would be trespassing," Chad said. "And Derek," he nodded at the security guard, "will be happy to assist you." Derek stepped forward, one hand resting near his belt, not aggressive, but prepared. Danielle took one final look around the showroom. No one said anything. Not a single customer intervened. The employees didn't flinch. She had walked into her own dealership, and they were treating her like she didn't belong in the world she built with her own hands. She turned back to Chad. "You sure about this?" Chad's response was cold. "Get out. Now." Danielle nodded slowly. Her voice was calm, colder than his. "You have no idea what you've just done." Then she walked out as every pair of eyes turned back to their safe, polished world, unaware that a storm had just walked through the front door. Danielle Morgan sat behind the wheel of her 2014 Corolla, the same way she had so many times before. But this time, her grip on the steering wheel wasn't about driving. It was about control. Emotional control. Because the rage boiling inside her wasn't loud or explosive. It was the kind of quiet fury that burns slow and deep like embers in a fire pit just before the blaze reignites. She glanced back at the pristine facade of Crown Elite Motors through the rearview mirror. The same dealership she'd purchased just 4 months ago. The one she had trusted a hand-picked leadership team to manage. The one she now knew had been rotting under polished marble and stainless steel. Her phone buzzed in her lap. A message from her executive assistant. "You good?" Danielle didn't reply. Not yet. Because just as she reached for the ignition, a movement caught her eye. Across the lot, a young black woman, maybe late 20s, was stepping out of a sleek silver Lexus. Professional, confident. She had on a fitted navy blazer, high-waisted slacks, and modest heels. Her natural curls were pinned neatly to the side, and she walked with purpose. Danielle froze. Her heart sank. The woman walked up to the showroom's glass doors and pulled them open with the kind of grace that said she had no reason to expect anything less than respect. Her name would turn out to be Monica Gaines, a financial consultant from Pasadena. She'd just closed a major contract and wanted to celebrate with her dream car, a BMW 7 Series she'd bookmarked for years. Danielle watched with an ache in her chest, because she already knew what was coming. From her vantage point in the parking lot, Danielle could see Lindsay glance up as Monica approached the desk. The same routine played out like a twisted dress rehearsal. Monica was met with a cold look, a lazy once-over, a dismissive gesture toward the used lot just down the road. Monica didn't understand at first. You could see the confusion on her face, the way her brows pulled together when Lindsay handed her a business card instead of offering to show her around. She leaned in slightly, asking about the BMWs. Danielle couldn't hear the conversation, but the receptionist's body language said everything. Arms crossed, chin tilted, barely masked disdain. Danielle's blood pressure climbed with every second. And then the final blow. Chad appeared again. His slick hair, that smug walk, and his perfectly curated superiority were back in action. He stepped between Monica and the reception desk with a fake smile that didn't reach his eyes. Danielle didn't need audio to know the drill. She could almost hear the lines word for word. "Those vehicles are reserved for qualified clients. You'll need a pre-approval. Maybe another dealership would suit your needs." It was like watching a cruel magic trick on repeat. Only the illusion was that dignity didn't matter unless you fit their mold. Danielle didn't hesitate. Her fingers moved with practiced calm as she opened her phone and tapped a single phrase into her group chat with her executive team: activate Protocol 7. That message was the internal code for emergency action, not PR cleanup, not retraining, not a memo. Protocol 7 meant scorched earth. It meant that a full audit was coming, that legal and HR would be mobilized instantly, and that Danielle herself would be entering the building, not as a test subject, but as a reckoning. Within minutes, messages poured in from her executive VP, her legal counsel, her PR strategist. They knew what this meant. Every system was in motion. Danielle turned the key in her ignition and pulled away slowly from the curb. But she didn't go far. She drove 2 blocks down, parked again, and opened her trunk. Inside was a garment bag she'd brought just in case. Within 20 minutes, she had transformed. Gone were the faded jeans and sneakers. In their place, a tailored plum-colored pantsuit, clean lines, power shoulders, fitted like a second skin. Her hair was released from the cap, now shaped into a sleek chignon. Subtle gold earrings, a soft silk blouse in ivory. Her heels, 4 inches tall, clicked like war drums as she stepped back into the sunlight. She looked like what she was: the CEO, the founder, the woman who signs the paychecks. Danielle returned to Crown Elite Motors like a storm cloud ready to split the sky. As she entered through the glass doors, the same showroom that had ignored her an hour before seemed to vibrate with tension. Lindsay looked up, and for a split second, her smile flickered to life until recognition failed to arrive. She didn't realize this woman in power was the same nobody she had dismissed earlier. "Good morning, ma'am. Welcome to Crown Elite. How can I assist you today?" she chirped, her voice coated in honey now. Danielle didn't respond. She walked past her slowly. 3 steps in, Chad appeared. He wasn't smiling this time. He wasn't scowling either. He was calculating. He saw the designer suit, the polished heels, the quiet confidence. "Can I help you, miss?" Chad asked, stepping into her path. "Are you meeting with one of our associates today?" Danielle turned toward him. Calm, direct. "No. I'm here to speak with your regional director." That got his attention. He blinked. "I'm sorry, what was your name again?" Danielle tilted her head. "Tell him Danielle Morgan is here." The shift in Chad's face was immediate. His smile faltered. The blood drained from his cheeks. It was like someone had hit him in the chest with a blunt object. Before he could reply, the front doors burst open. Philip Tran, the regional director, practically jogged across the showroom. His tie was crooked, his briefcase forgotten. The man looked like he'd aged 5 years in 20 minutes. He spotted Danielle and froze. "Ms. Morgan," he gasped. I just got the call. I didn't know you were coming in person." Lindsay looked between them, her face turning ghostly white. You could see the pieces falling into place. Danielle gave the smallest nod. "Thank you for coming, Philip. We're going to have a conversation." But first, she turned slowly toward Chad. "Let's talk about how your team evaluates customers." Chad's mouth opened, but nothing came out. His hands were trembling. He tried to fake composure. "I apologize if there's been any confusion," he stammered. Had I known, Danielle's voice was sharp but composed. "That's exactly the problem," she said, each word slicing through the room like a blade. "Your respect shouldn't depend on knowing who I am." The silence inside Crown Elite Motors was so deep, you could hear the faint hum of the overhead lights. Every employee had stopped what they were doing. The salesman chatting with customers, the receptionist who had once been so smug, even the security guard near the side entrance. All eyes were locked on Danielle Morgan and Chad Reynolds, and for the first time, Chad looked like he understood he was standing in the middle of a ticking bomb. Danielle stood calm, unshaken. This was no longer a test. This was Judgment Day, and she wasn't going to raise her voice. She didn't need to. Chad tried again. "Ms. Morgan, I didn't recognize you earlier." "If I had," she cut him off with one sharp glance, "you would have treated me like a human being." His lips parted, then shut again. No answer. Because there was none. Philip Tran, the regional director, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "Ms. Morgan," he said nervously, "if you give us a moment, I can—" "No," she said. "I want the staff here. I want them to see what real accountability looks like." Danielle turned and walked slowly to the front reception desk. She reached into her leather tote and pulled out a small white card. No gold trim, no dramatic font, just clean lettering printed in bold black ink. Danielle Morgan, CEO, Morgan Lux Auto Group. She placed it gently on the marble counter. The quiet tap echoed louder than any shouting match. Lindsay took one look and turned pale as paper. Her mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. She stumbled back a step, blinking rapidly. Danielle faced her now. You judged me the moment I walked in. You made assumptions based on my clothes, my car, my skin. You didn't even bother to ask how you could help me. You decided I didn't belong, and you made it your job to make sure I knew it. Lindsay was visibly shaking. I, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Danielle didn't flinch. You were never supposed to know. That was the entire point. You weren't just rude, you were discriminatory. And today you revealed exactly who you are when you think no one important is watching. She turned back to Chad. You called security on me, demanded financial documents, treated me like a threat. And when I left, you probably told your staff you handled it well, that you protected your showroom from someone who didn't belong. Chad's face was ashen. I didn't mean you meant every word Danielle said, and now you get to face the consequences. She glanced toward the back. Where's Derek? The security guard appeared near the break room hallway. Derek, the man who had physically laid hands on her as he escorted her off the property like a criminal, now stood with his arms crossed tightly, trying to appear composed. You grabbed me by the arm, Danielle said evenly. Without warning, without cause, because you followed an order that never should have been given. Let me be clear, that's not just bad judgment. It's a legal liability. Derek's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The weight of his mistake settled into his posture. Danielle looked around at the rest of the staff now. The sales reps who had ignored her, the junior managers pretending to be invisible. No one spoke. No one moved. I founded this company on one core principle, she said slowly, her voice gaining weight. That every customer, no matter what they wear, where they're from, or what they look like, deserves respect. She turned to Philip. And this dealership has failed. Spectacularly. Philip was already nodding. Ms. Morgan, I take full responsibility. No, she interrupted you. Take organizational responsibility. But these three, she pointed first to Chad, then to Lindsay, and finally to Derek. They're done. There was no room for negotiation in her voice. Effective immediately. Clear your desks. Turn in your badges. The air was sucked out of the room. Chad stepped forward, his voice cracking. Please, Ms. Morgan, I've worked here for 8 years. Danielle's expression didn't change. Then you've had 8 years to learn what professionalism looks like. And today you proved you still haven't. Lindsay broke down into quiet tears, but Danielle didn't waver. Not from cruelty, but because this wasn't about emotion. It was about integrity. Philip called over the assistant manager and quietly instructed her to escort the three out. The other employees still stood frozen in place, unsure whether they were watching the end of a career or a warning flare over their own. And then Danielle did something unexpected, something no one in that showroom could have predicted. She turned and walked toward Monica Gaines. Monica had stood silently near the entrance, unsure if she should leave or stay. She looked both mortified and curious. Her eyes met Danielle's, filled with questions and hesitation. Danielle extended her hand. Hi, I'm Danielle Morgan. I own this place. Monica blinked. I thought I recognized your name. I saw what happened to you. And I want to apologize personally, Danielle said. You were treated like you didn't belong here, when in fact you're exactly the kind of customer we should be proud to serve. Monica looked stunned. Thank you. I just came in to see the 7 Series. I wasn't expecting this. Danielle smiled gently. Well, I think we still have that model on the floor, and I'd like you to take a look at it with me. As my guest. Monica's eyes softened, still hesitant. Really, Danielle nodded. And I'd also like to offer you a discount. A significant one. Not as a bribe, but as recognition that your time was wasted, your dignity was overlooked, and your experience was unacceptable. Monica looked around at the stunned staff, then back at Danielle. I don't know what to say. Just say you'll give us a second chance. Danielle said, her tone warm now. The two women walked toward the lineup of luxury sedans. As they passed the remaining employees, Danielle paused and turned to the group once more. "This isn't over," she said. "This entire dealership is about to change. From the ground up." And with that, she and Monica disappeared into the rows of gleaming vehicles, the place where this nightmare began, and where something better might just begin again. Danielle Morgan stood beside the sleek midnight blue BMW 7 Series, listening as Monica ran her fingers along the edge of the driver's side door, visibly moved but still slightly guarded. The showroom had gone silent. From across the room, stunned employees watched the CEO, the woman they had dismissed as an unqualified browser, now personally guiding a customer through a premium vehicle like royalty, return to reclaim her house. Monica turned to her, her voice still shaky. "I've followed your story, from the early days. My dad used to point you out in the business section. Said you reminded him of my aunt." Danielle smiled faintly. "I'm honored. And I'm sorry you had to experience this today. I just didn't expect to walk in and feel invisible," Monica replied, eyes glistening. "You work so hard, you save, you earn your place, and then someone takes one look and decides you don't belong." Danielle nodded. "That's what I'm here to fix. For you. For every other Monica who's walked through these doors and been made to feel like an outsider in their own success story." Across the showroom, Philip Tran was now huddled with two senior managers, giving rapid-fire instructions, his phone glued to his ear. He was already in damage control mode, scheduling emergency meetings, prepping statements, and alerting the Human Resources Division for a full review. But none of that mattered unless the culture itself changed. Danielle walked Monica to the lounge area where she arranged for a full VIP consultation, complete with a test drive, personalized financing options, and a fresh espresso. She didn't delegate it. She stayed, sat with her, talked with her. Because this moment wasn't just about correcting a transaction, it was about restoring dignity. After Monica left, grateful, surprised, and already texting her sister about what had just happened, Danielle called a full staff meeting on the showroom floor. It was unplanned, unscripted, but deeply necessary. She stood tall, backlit by the sunlight pouring in through the tall windows. Employees gathered slowly, warily. Some were embarrassed, others confused. A few looked defensive, unsure whether to brace or bow. But all of them were there. Danielle scanned their faces. Some young, some older. Diverse in appearance, but clearly molded by the same poisonous culture of silent prejudice and unchecked arrogance. "I want you to understand something very clearly." She began, her voice strong but measured. "Today wasn't a setup. It wasn't a trap. It was a mirror." She paused, letting the words sink in. "What you saw, what you did, what you failed to do, that is your culture. And it's broken. No one moved. You didn't just disrespect me. You disrespected a young woman looking to reward her hard work. You disrespected every customer who walks in here hoping to be treated with fairness and courtesy. And you disrespected the values I built this company on from the beginning." Danielle's eyes narrowed slightly. "Some of you might be thinking, I didn't say anything. I didn't do what Chad did." But silence is complicity. You watched it happen. You let it happen. That's how rot spreads. One of the sales associates, a young Latino man named Hector, looked visibly shaken. He'd watched Chad berate Danielle earlier and said nothing. Now the shame on his face was unmistakable. "This isn't about one bad apple," Danielle continued. "This is about the tree, the soil, the roots. And if we don't dig it all up, burn out the disease, and start fresh, we're no better than the ones who get caught and make excuses." She took a breath, softening her tone. "But here's the good news. I believe in change. I believe in second chances for those willing to earn them." Murmurs rippled through the group. Effective today, Danielle said Crown Elite Motors is entering a cultural overhaul. Not a rebrand, a re-education. She outlined the Plan 1, mandatory diversity and equity training led by outside professionals with real accountability. Attendance wasn't optional. Participation wasn't symbolic. 2, character-based hiring standards. All future employees would undergo scenario-based interviews that tested compassion, respect, and awareness. No more hiring based on image alone. 3, ongoing performance reviews, not just for sales metrics, but for ethical behavior and inclusivity. Anyone caught discriminating, stereotyping, or ignoring protocol would be immediately disciplined or dismissed. 4. Secret shopper evaluations, anonymous, unannounced, and regular. Danielle would not be the last hidden test. 5. Empowered customer advocacy. A new department created solely to ensure no customer felt unheard. Every complaint, no matter how quiet, would be investigated with seriousness. She finished the list, then paused. If that feels like too much, she said plainly, there's the door. This place is for professionals who treat every person with respect. Period. Some employees nodded slowly. A few looked down ashamed. Others visibly breathed out as if they'd waited years for someone to finally say it out loud. Danielle looked around one final time. I built Morgan Lux for people who were told they didn't belong in spaces like this, she said. And I won't let anyone turn it into the very thing we were fighting against. She turned and walked away, leaving the staff in stunned silence, the echo of her heels ringing louder than any words. Outside, the sun was starting to dip behind the Beverly Hills skyline. Danielle stepped into her real car this time, a jet black Tesla Model S. Not as a display of wealth, but as a symbol of full-circle power. She had walked into that building invisible. She had walked out undeniable. Her phone buzzed again. It was a text from Monica, thank you. Not just for the car, but for standing up for people like me. Danielle smiled for the first time that day. It wasn't a smile of victory, it was one of resolve. The fight wasn't over, but it had started. And from now on, no one would walk through those showroom doors feeling small again. The following week, Crown Elite Motors didn't just look different, it felt different. Gone were the hushed whispers and guarded stares, the fake smiles and quiet assumptions. In their place came tension, yes, but the kind of tension that precedes change. That raw discomfort that meant something real was happening. Every staff member who remained after Danielle's impromptu visit had been given a stark choice: evolve or exit. 3 more employees voluntarily stepped down within the first 48 hours. Not because they were told to, but because they knew they couldn't or wouldn't adjust to the new standard. And then came the new hires. Danielle herself had overseen the first round of interviews. Applicants weren't judged by how they looked on paper or the watch on their wrist. Instead, she asked them questions like, what would you do if a customer walked in wearing worn clothes and asked to test drive our most expensive car? Describe a time you misjudged someone and what you learned. Have you ever stood up for someone being treated unfairly when it wasn't your job? Those who blinked and stuttered didn't make it to round 2. But those who answered with humility, empathy, and backbone, they were hired on the spot. Training sessions followed, intensive, emotional, and confrontational, the kind that pulled everyone out of their comfort zones. Danielle brought in civil rights educators, communication coaches, and even past customers who had experienced subtle forms of discrimination at dealerships around the country. Employees were made to walk through role-play exercises. One day, a former manager was forced to play the role of a customer in worn sneakers, while a trainee played the role of an arrogant associate. It was humbling. It was awkward. It was unforgettable. Danielle didn't hover or micromanage. She observed quietly, made notes, and only stepped in when it mattered. Her message to the team was clear. You are not here to protect luxury. You are here to welcome people into it. And then, just when things seemed to be settling into their new rhythm, Danielle called for one last all-hands meeting. It was held on a Friday afternoon under the chandeliers in the main showroom. The same space where she had once stood invisible to the staff, now filled with anticipation and focus. She stood in front of them, heels planted firmly on the marble floor, hands clasped gently. I want to tell you about my first dealership, she began. Her voice was softer this time, slower. It was a rented lot in South LA. No granite floors, no cappuccino machines. Just 10 cars, half of them junkers, and a plastic banner that said, Morgan Auto. I didn't have a college degree or fancy connections, just grit, and the belief that every person who walked through my lot deserved to be treated with dignity. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. I never forgot what it felt like to be judged before I spoke, to have to prove I belonged in spaces others walked through freely. That's why I built this company. Not just to sell luxury, but to redefine who gets to enjoy it. Danielle stepped forward, her tone steady. I could have fired more of you. Maybe I should have. But I believe that people can change, that systems can evolve, that character can be taught. She turned her gaze toward the sales desk where a framed photo of her late father now stood. He had been the first to teach her how to fix a car, and how to stand tall when others wanted her to shrink. That photo doesn't belong to me. It belongs to this space now. As a reminder that who you serve matters just as much as how you serve. Danielle nodded toward the door. Monica came back yesterday, she said. She brought her younger brother. They're buying a second car, and she told me something that stopped me cold. She looked around the room, eyes clear. She said, "This was the first time I've ever felt seen in a place like this." Danielle let the silence stretch. That is what we do now. We see people. We hear people. We don't ask them to prove their worth. We show them they already have it. She exhaled slowly. This is the line in the sand. From this moment forward, every customer who walks through that door gets respect, not suspicion. Courtesy, not judgment. Because if that's too hard, you're in the wrong building. Then she smiled. Just a little. I don't expect perfection. I expect awareness. I expect effort. I expect growth. And if you give me that, I'll give you my full support, my protection, my leadership. Because this isn't just a car dealership anymore. This is a standard. One by one, heads nodded. Employees who had once stood frozen in shame now stood rooted in responsibility. As the meeting dispersed, Danielle stood alone near the reception desk. Lindsay's old spot, now manned by a young woman named Amina, kind, perceptive, and already making customers feel like family. Danielle reached into her tote and pulled out a tiny silver keychain, a miniature steering wheel. She clipped it onto the desk corner. "You drive the experience now," she whispered. Outside, the sun was starting to dip, casting golden light through the glass. The cars shimmered like polished promise. And somewhere across town, another woman, maybe dressed in jeans and driving a beat-up Corolla, was preparing to walk into a dealership like this one. This time she'd be seen. This time she'd be heard. This time she'd be welcomed. Stories like this one aren't just about justice. They're about awareness. About those quiet, everyday moments where someone chooses to see you or chooses to ignore you. And whether they realize it or not, those choices ripple. They stick. They teach people what they're worth or what they're not. Danielle Morgan reminded us that power doesn't always look like a fancy suit or a sleek car. Sometimes real power walks in quietly, wearing sneakers, asking questions, waiting to see how you'll respond when no one's watching. And Chad, Lindsay, Derek, they learned the hard way that the way you treat a stranger says more about you than it does about them. But this story didn't end with revenge. It ended with rebuilding, with change, and with a commitment to make sure the next Monica who walks through that door gets respect from the very first moment. So wherever you are right now, at work, at home, maybe in a waiting room, or on your evening walk, remember this: you never know who's watching, and you never know what someone's been through just to stand in front of you. Lead with kindness, speak with decency, and treat every single person like they do belong. Because the truth is, they do. Thanks for listening. If this story moved, you share it with someone who needs to hear it. And as always, take care of yourself and each other.